You're live. Thank you very much. Would you mind doing roll call for us, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bramer.
Here.
Supervisor Dickinson. Supervisor Sieber. Wayne Lamont.
Here.
Ray Agnew.
Here.
Beth Gillis.
Here.
Supervisor Thomas.
Here.
Supervisor Beatty.
Here.
Supervisor Wild.
Here.
Supervisor Leggett. Ethan Gaddy.
Here.
Quorum is established.
Thank you very much. Okay. And just for people watching on the video, Supervisor Merlino is not on the committee. So it's okay. It's okay. As long as you stay in the corner over there, Supervisor Merlino.
That's my life story.
Thank you for joining us, Supervisor Sieber. We're just getting started. And the first thing we're going to do is motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting, please. I have that from, thank you, Supervisor Beatty. Supervisor Thomas, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? An abstention? That carries. Thank you. Okay. And then the first thing we'll go to privilege of the floor. And I know we have a couple of county staff here today to give us some information. So I want to go to them first. I know you guys have busy schedules. So Sarah, you want to fill us in?
So I just wanted to give everybody an update because we've had a lot of things happening with broadband in the last couple of weeks. And we don't have committee meeting until after the due date for some of these. And I know that that's been a topic of conversation at the ARPA committee. So there are currently two challenges that are happening at the federal level via the FCC. The first, you may have gotten some emails from NACO or NISAC or heard about this Association of Towns and Villages. I know I've gotten several calls over the last few days. So there is an address challenge that had a deadline of December 1st for one component of it, but they're now accepting rolling submissions. That was basically to look, so FCC has released parcel level broadband data or address level broadband data. So in the past, we've had road level data that was collected by ECC. We hired ECC, or EDC hired ECC a couple of years ago to map broadband availability at the road level. Since then, FCC and the state have been working on mapping broadband availability at the individual address level. So we're moving from road level data to now individual address level data. And we have the opportunity to contest FCC's data, both on locations of addresses and how many addresses there are that are broadband serviceable locations in Warren County, as well as whether those locations are being serviced by the providers that FCC has on record. So the first of those challenges we completed already. We had to request data from the FCC. We compared that with our internal address data that we maintain in our office. We're the master addressing authority for Warren County. So that process took 20-ish hours, and we submitted that back to the FCC. Each one of those addresses potentially is worth money from the FCC to the state. So we've submitted successfully. We're waiting to hear back whether they accept the additional addresses that we submitted that we found missing from their data. So that portion of the process is complete. I believe that this has not been completed by most of the counties in the state. So if you do see emails coming from NACO or NISAC, Warren County has completed that challenge already. So the second challenge that is ongoing now as of November 18th and is due January 13th is a provider challenge. So the FCC also released a map with every address that they have on record showing what information they have as far as each one of those addresses and who they are serviced by. So we have the ability to review that data and submit mistakes back to the FCC. There's a lot of data prep to get ready to do that. So that's what I'm working on right now. There's also a non-disclosure agreement. So we have asked the FCC to clarify that to see whether we can involve town supervisors in the review of that data. Been working with the regional planning board on that and also with the state DPS office. So we're moving forward with that, and we should be reaching out to town supervisors. Probably Beth will be doing that sometime over the course of the next couple of weeks so that we can refine the process. And if we find mistakes, get ready to submit those to the FCC by January 13th. Anything to add, Beth?
No, I think you got it all.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thanks.
Any questions before Sarah goes?
I should note too that the regional planning board has federal funding from the Northern Border Regional Commission to pay for broadband planning in our 5-county area. So that's going to help pay for the work that Sarah's doing for Warren County, and then assisting my other 4 counties as well.
Step right out, Jim. No, let me have, anyone have any questions on that? I guess I'm going to ask, you did mention about the non-disclosure of the provider data. How does that relate to what EDC is saying that they will be able to provide publicly?
So the provider data is public. Anybody can download that provider data off of the FCC's broadband map website. The data that has a non-disclosure agreement is the individual address locations. So I have signed a non-disclosure agreement for that data. Up until now, we've used that only internally within our office. I have sent an email to the FCC to find out if town supervisors or other county officials would be covered under our non-disclosure agreement, or if we would actually have to add individual names into that non-disclosure agreement. I have not heard back from the FCC, but all of the provider data is public. All the address data is also public on the FCC broadband map. The thing that's not public is the bulk single file of all of the address locations. So
if you wanted to go through individually and pinpoint things, you could do that.
Yes. Yeah.
You just wouldn't have a file with all of the listing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Liza, I think you're up. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just here to share a little bit of information about how our current and future workforce in our community is being impacted by mental health challenges, because I know that's one of your agenda items you'll be discussing today. Mental health continues to be definitely a barrier to employment, not only in our community, but in our nation. And people battling mental health challenges are doing it with fewer resources these days. And if someone's facing mental health challenges, it is a lot harder to obtain and retain employment. But it's not just the unemployed or the underemployed who are facing this, but it's also people who are gainfully employed. And that's why we continue to see an emphasis on mental health in the workplace, trainings, positive work culture, trying to retain the workers that we do have, to keep staff morale up, reduce chances of workplace violence, conflicts, and worker substance use. I've shared with many of you before the importance of emphasizing, or I've emphasized to you before the importance of investing in our youth now, or we will end up paying for it later in social services and criminal justice. And we're seeing that in our youth GED class, which for the first time to our knowledge is full with a waiting list. And why is that? We have, there's plenty of evidence to show that young people felt disconnected, right, when they were doing remote learning, and they felt disengaged from their schools, and it's been hard to get back on track. So we've had dropouts from our school districts, and our youth GED class is full and with a waiting list. To speak to that a little bit more, some of you may have seen a study and an article that came out last week in Washington Post. The study was from Biological Psychiatry, Global Open Science, and they talked about how there is evidence now of how youth brains have been impacted by the pandemic. So I wanted to share this information with you, but I'm happy to send the article to Chairwoman Bramer to share out. But a few things that really stood out to me, and I'm sharing this quote from them. By comparing MRI scans of a group of 128 children taken before and half at the end of the first year of the pandemic, the researchers found growth in the hippocampus and amygdala brain areas that control access to some memories and regulate fear, stress, and other emotions. They also found thinning of the tissues in the cortex, which is involved in executive functioning. These changes happen during normal adolescent development. However, the pandemic appeared to have accelerated the process. So adolescent brains from this study have aged years. So the premature aging isn't a positive development. They were saying that children have had stress and trauma and abuse and neglect, and they've seen that in brains with adverse childhood experiences, but they didn't expect to see so much impact from the pandemic. And why does this matter to me, and why does this matter to all of us? Because this is our future workforce. And we have an aging population here in Warren County, and that's why in my workforce development programs, which are funded by ARPA, which I'm super grateful for, we are continuing to focus on investing in our young people. But we don't have enough mental health services for not only our adults in our community, but our youth especially. They are the most vulnerable population, and now we're seeing evidence of how the pandemic has impacted them. I would probably bet money on it. I'm not a doctor, but I would bet money on that adult brains have also been impacted just in similar ways that youth have, since we've seen an increase in mental health needs at hospitals and human service agencies. Some of your colleagues in other counties in New York have chosen to use ARPA funds as well for a lot of mental health investment. And I know you guys have already allocated $1 million to community services, which I totally commend. I do think we need more. Some examples of what other counties have done that stood out to me: Ulster County has allocated $5 million for mental health and addiction recovery services, and $3 million of that is for a 24/7 community service or community crisis response hub. If any of you talk to any law enforcement officers that you know, just ask them how many of their calls are about mental health. I'm not a law enforcement agent. I respect them greatly. And I'm just wondering if it's efficient use of resources and time, if we don't have enough mental health resources in the community. And other counties and places like Ulster County, Onondaga County are coming up with other ways to address these mental health challenges. Onondaga County allocated $5.5 million of their ARPA money to mental health clinics and schools, and hiring 64 new mental health professionals. And that's not just for their urban schools, that's for their rural schools as well. So I just wanted to share a couple of those as you all are thinking creatively and working together about how to address our mental health needs in our community. And certainly we continue to see challenges with homelessness and workforce development and vulnerable populations. These issues are all interconnected, but they all have targeted work and staff to address each of those challenges. So I wanted to just share how this is impacting our current workforce in our business community. It's trying to retain workers in a ongoing workforce shortage and then how it's going to impact and is already impacting our future workforce. But I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Yep, Mr. Agnew. Thank you, Liza.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Liza. Really important information, and I encourage everybody to read that article. It's pretty startling. Just to add a statement, and I do have a question also. We're seeing, and this percentage has stayed consistent. About 30% of the visits to our behavioral health to the emergency room that are behavioral health related are from adolescents. The difference is that in 2019, that was 30% of 150 to 200 a month. Now it's 30% of 450 to 700 a month. And those are huge numbers. And I know we've done a number of things. I'm really proud of this committee, for example, for funding the programs to get young people involved in some of the apprenticeship programs in addition to going to college. I think those are great. For Ulster and Onondaga County, do you happen to know what percentage of those budgets was the?
Yeah, and that's a good question. They do have larger budgets, ARPA budgets than you have. But I just thought the creative ideas with the 24-hour crisis response and then the focus on mental health clinics in the schools was something to note.
That's great. Really good information. Thank you.
Wayne.
Just to clarify that, Ulster County's award, I just looked it up, was 34.5 million. So 3 times basically what
Wow.
Warren County received.
Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you. Liza, I shot you an email with some follow-up questions regarding it, but just really quickly, the sample size that they looked at in that research, how did they define youth? Are they looking at teenagers or were they looking at?
Yeah, I don't recall, but I will find that for you. I know Stanford worked closely with them as well, so I'll see what I can find and share that back.
The reason I ask is to raise point. I'd like to know where, I know we're overloaded and we're on wait list everywhere, but to what extent in what different age groups, where can we best provide funding and support to close that gap as, that overload burden as much as possible, recognizing that we heard from our community how important mental health was, not just for our youth, but also in the adult, obviously that adult age range and what they're going through, people in the workforce or looking for work. So I think what you're providing is an emphasis on not just focusing on mental health broadly, but also really taking a look at our youth and what that looks like for accessibility for care. And I worry that wait list that we saw a decade ago or 20 years ago now is just, it's so difficult to receive any type of crisis counseling, let alone therapy, long-term therapy, that our mental health unit or behavioral health unit, right, at the hospital is seeing that huge over demand in essence. So I don't know the best way to tackle a problem, but I hope that this committee decides to tackle it with additional not only funds, but resources across the board.
Agreed. If I could just add, that was a great point you brought up about the age, because a lot of human service agencies and including some of the youth programs in my department are up to age 24. And very often when we think of youth, we think of 18 and under, but the brain is not fully developed until about 25. And that's why a lot of programs are up to age 24. But I'm sure this study was definitely kids under 18, but it's something to think about with our youth programs, that it's young adults as well who are really struggling with mental health and addiction.
Wayne.
Again, the Stanford study seems to reflect that most of the people studied were 16 to 17 years old.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Liza.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So with that, we'll go to our action agenda. And you have attached to the agenda the spreadsheet with the remaining applicants. So, some of them have been sitting here for a while. I don't know that we need to take action on all of these. I just wanted to make sure that we circled back and touched upon any that are still sitting here that we want to move forward. And while we're at the top two, so we still have the open door one. Maybe Liza, if you don't mind, not giving you any heads up at all, but I have asked Liza in the past about this because that was one that the committee wanted to see if it was overlapping with any of the things that we were already doing in workforce. So I think you'll be able to speak to this off the cuff, if you don't mind.
Happy to. Open Door is definitely a partner with our department, and some of their residents come to our workshops and our job fairs, but their program, they have like 8 S's, like being sober and skilled and stable. Their program covers so many more steps than just workforce development. This is about getting them ready to be employable again. So I don't see their program as redundant to the efforts and the programs that I'm doing and the projects that I'm doing with ARPA funding. I really see it as a more targeted program for their residents. So I don't see it as redundant, even though we are partners, in some of this work. Does that help answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions? So there's that one.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if the Meals on Wheels contract is still on there as well, but that was also like a workforce development program that I was working on with Salvation Army. And I don't know if a decision's been made about that, but that's also in partnership to try to help those who have barriers to employment to get experience, and then meeting the vulnerable population needs of our elderly with their meals. So I just wanted, because I'm a part of that project proposal too, I just wanted to mention that today.
That one is not currently pending before us. It kind of went to our committee, the Oversight Committee for Office of the Aging, and it will be reviewed as a direct county contract.
Okay.
So it would be funded that way rather than through ARPA funds. But Salvation Army did put in a new application for funding for the emergency shelter to cover Code Blue.
Okay.
So that one just came in either this morning or last night, and I wasn't planning on having us review that one today because I don't think people have had a chance to really digest it.
Sure. While you're digesting it, I will just share that if that is the direction we're headed in our community with Salvation Army having Code Blue next year, that process would need to start as soon as possible, because the state will have a lot of paperwork that they have to do to approve a site, and before he can really move forward with that. So I know he has a space picked out and a plan picked out, but he would need financial support to move forward immediately. So I just wanted to advocate for that as well, since you're figuring out what to do with the final remaining funds. Everything's good luck deciding.
Yeah. Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, I am a little confused. This county's been super supportive of the Open Door and Code Blue. In fact, we even, one year they had nowhere to go, we put them up here right in Warren County. We bust them in, those needing shelter and so forth. So is it, I don't know if you know the answer or not, Liza, but so is Open Door now getting rid of Code Blue, which to me was a huge reason why I supported Open Door, among other reasons. But the fact that they were, we found a place for them in Glens Falls. It made it very easy for individuals, since the majority of the population is down in Glens Falls and Queensburg. I don't know. I mean, now all of a sudden I see that Salvation Army says, hey, give us $250,000, we'll do the Code Blue, or we'll open up a facility. So is Open Door now backing away from all that Code Blue?
Yeah, and I certainly can't speak for Open Door, but I've had these direct conversations with them. So what I have learned from my colleague at Open Door is that one of the challenges they've had with managing Code Blue is when they have somebody come in who is struggling with addiction or still involved in criminal activity, and they have somebody who's just been released from incarceration. It's really hard to get the person who's trying to stay on the straight and narrow path to stay on that path when they have negative influences around them from Code Blue. And their goal is to really transition to like a transitionary housing kind of place where everybody, all of the residents there are primarily focused on themselves, right? And their own recovery instead of in long-term recovery and not just day-to-day overnight making it through Code Blue. I hope that makes sense, but that's what was shared with me. And those are some of the challenges they continue to face. But definitely there's a lot of concern, rightfully so, in our community about this transition and the investments that have been made in Open Door.
Supervisor.
Thank you, Liza. So what I'm hearing is basically they've got an operational challenge of having individuals who are coming in to try to stay warm so they don't freeze to death, being mixed with individuals that are fighting addiction. And I think that's more of an operational, logistical concern than a policy concern, in my opinion. I mean, I think both of them need help. And I'm not really supportive of Open Door saying, well, we're going to shoo aside the people that are going to freeze tonight and in favor of the ones who have addictions. I think they both should be serviced. That's all I'm saying. I'm not comfortable with the Open Door relinquishing their commitment to helping those that need temporary shelter. That's all. So I wanted that to be said.
With that said, we have this other one for Open Door. We also have the Tri-County United Way. They submitted a new application, a revised application. Remember, they had put in a request for a significant sum to help individual not-for-profits. And we said, well, no, we've already done that. So come up with something for your own benefit. And they did put in a request for $60,000 to help them with marketing and coming out of the pandemic, fundraising, that sort of thing. Okay, and then the Brant Lake, the water quality one. And then the EDC. And I know Jim is here. I'm happy to extend privilege of the floor to Jim. We heard from Sarah about broadband. There's the two applications about housing and broadband. Jim, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and apologize for being a few minutes late and I missed whatever dialogue you had with Sarah, but it sounds like she answered whatever the question was. It's ironic because I was with elected officials in our state legislature this afternoon trying to talk through the constantly evolving area of broadband and how we're going to step into the multiplicity of grants that will be available over the coming years and what regional coalitions we will use. When we wrote this grant application is almost, I think it was 9 months ago. It was a number of months ago, and a lot of things have changed since then. So at that time, there was no FCC challenge process, and the county was held under a pretty forthright NDA with carriers on the information that we had used on previous grant efforts. All that has evolved in the period of time. I think Sarah probably shared some of that with you. We actually are the facilitators of getting Sarah the access that she was needing. And I think this is working exactly the way it's supposed to. It's just a really fluid environment. Here's what I know about, what I can share with you that's new about the broadband effort. Yesterday, I was at the Association of Adirondack Towns and Villages, and we talked for several hours about broadband, not only what's been accomplished, but what remains to be accomplished. There's a multiplicity of people that are involved. Beth in this room and Sarah, who you've already heard from, and many others, including carriers. The center of gravity for almost all of that effort north of Albany in the state is what's known as the North Country Broadband Alliance, which is an organization that the EDC chairs, has always done so. We created it to essentially create a texture for these problems to be addressed and for all of these changes to have some place to nimbly be addressed. That is in more demand than it ever has been. The fact that we were asked to go speak at the Association of Towns and Villages is evidence of that. They're trying to figure out how even more people can participate in that process, where they can potentially participate in larger scale regional grant efforts or larger collective efforts towards addressing the gap that remains on broadband. What is in the middle of all this is the leadership that the EDC, primarily under John Wheatley, provides. He holds a weekly call. He holds regular legislative sessions and forums that have led to actual legislative change in Albany. And we will continue to be the place where we develop the potential teamwork that will be required to step into the several $billion that will be available over the coming years. When I wrote the grant, I said there were a number of bases that we were writing it for. There is no doubt that the EDC has incurred significant expense during the period of responding to the broadband needs of COVID. And I believe that that is fundamental to both your ARPA process and the original grant application. The biggest of those was the more than $30,000 that we spent to produce the first assessed maps that did an accurate mapping down to the address of everybody in Warren County and their broadband status. I'm really happy about the fact that the rest of the area is starting to adopt that same process. It doesn't change the fact that the EDC went and did that without seeking additional funds from the county and did the work that went into supporting that grant effort without any change in its scope and contract of services to the county. Still think it was the right thing to do. It's unrecovered costs that we had that were associated with responding to COVID. Now going forward, I believe that we're going to offer to continue to facilitate the Broadband Alliance as we have weekly and all of the follow-up actions that come from it. I think you have to make a decision about whether or not you think that's a worthy investment for ARPA funds. If you don't provide those funds, then that will come out of the existing funds that are allocated to the EDC, even though the scope of service does not include broadband. But we will do it because it needs to be done. So I'm suggesting that this is a graceful and elegant way to address that need with funds that literally have broadband in the title of the act. Compared to your regional peers, if you look to your east, Washington County is allocating several $1 million. Saratoga County is allocating several $1 million. Essex County is allocating several $1 million of their ARPA funds to address their gaps in broadband. The fact that you are only being asked for $50,000 to address not only the work that's been done, but will be done going forward is remarkable value for dollar. And I advocate strongly that you approve it in full, but we will obviously move forward regardless of whatever decision you make. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. As far as the housing application goes, I just also spent time in the last 2 days having meetings with a number of local elected officials as well as state elected officials about using the same model we've had on broadband towards addressing many of the shortages that we experience in our community around housing. Ultimately, everyone agrees that one of the missing ingredients is a greater awareness by the public in the demographic and information gap that we have about how we got to this position, exactly where we are in terms of the data, and how to bring that to as many people as possible. Again, there are many efforts that are focused on this. Beth and her team are doing a wonderful job across the 6-county area of bringing a series of that data to bear, primarily to supervisors. But there was a huge need to go to town boards, planning boards, school boards, community organizations like Rotary and other organizations that will have us to be able to share this information in as many places as we can, so as many people become educated about these basic trends and data. That way, a more educated conversation can be had about the serious needs we have for housing and what are the potential solutions. That's what I proposed that the EDC do, is basically go out with materials that we can provide to communities across not only Warren County, but even beyond that, to address this problem and to pay for the people that not only develop that material, but make the trips to provide it. That's the basis of the two applications. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just walking down the sheet. Another one that jumps out is the textbooks. Versus, this is for SUNY Plattsburgh, if I recall correctly. The next one was about the premium pay, and we were not moving forward with those. Sorry, Beth.
How much do we have left?
Okay, sorry. That's a good question. And Gina has a spreadsheet that she has going for us. I just want to pull that up because she shared it with me earlier, and I can certainly send it to you guys. It's got all of the applications from before. So we had 12.4 million. We had previously allocated almost 7.9. And then we've awarded 1.9 million in applications. Okay. So we're down to remaining 2.5 million, just a tiny bit more than 2.5 million. Then at our last committee meeting, we did the 100,000 for the daycare, which has not been approved by the full board. And then we did the 172,500 for the City of Glens Falls rec program, and that's not been awarded either by the full board. But if those two were, we would be at 2.273 million.
And how much do we have left in ask? So of all the applications, I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's you know, do you know, I think we have about 1.7, a little bit more. I'm going to say 2 million in asks. Okay. And that includes some money to the hospital. I was throwing in. So if we have 2.2 to allocate and about 2 million in asks between what we have here in front of us, the new EMS ones that came in, the VFW, the Salvation Army, and the hospital.
And the United Way.
And what?
United Way.
Yes, Tri-County United Way.
Question. Does the remaining balance include what is still left at Community Services Board out of their million award?
No.
Because there's 444,000 that is still in that pot.
Well, I will defer to Rob's report. I was going to get to that, but I can do that now. Just so we have a better universe of what's happening. He sent us this written report, which you guys have, you should have in your emails. I won't read it all over again, but they were able to award $1 million. Some of the projects they were able to use other funding for, but let me just pull this up. They awarded money to Wait House for clinical services for homeless youth. They did a media project for challenges facing youth. They've done ADK EAP for a health platform, Brayton Psychological Services for youth support group, People USA to help with the transitional care wellness team, and then Warren Washington Association of Mental Health Community Outreach. They've also allocated from their subgroup, but it hasn't been approved by the full Community Services Board, 444,000 for Glens Falls Hospitals project. So that's their $1 million. Not included in what we're talking about in our roughly 2.2. So we still have money. I'm hopeful that we will not go down to the very last penny, because I think that some things may still come up. But I also don't think we need to say no on all these applications that are still remaining, because we have money.
Where did
You
Sorry?
want us to start?
Yeah, yeah, whatever you guys, I'm counting on you to lead the way here. You want to start us off, Beth, with something?
Yeah, I mean, I'd make a motion to give the Tri-County United Way the 60,000 that they asked for in their application. They said they've lost 75,000 in fundraising revenue over the last 2 years. So I think that's a reasonable ask.
Okay, I have a second from Mr. Agnew. Discussion. Yep.
I can give an example specific to Glens Falls Hospital, which participates in the fundraising for the United Way. Before COVID, when we would traditionally push out information to our employees to participate in the United Way, we get between 100 and 130 new donors for them every year. Since COVID hit, without United Way being able to come in and actually do the presentations that they had done and table in the cafeteria and talk to people, it's dropped to 30 or 40 a year. So they need help getting the word out more strenuously. Can't think of the right words.
Creatively, a different way.
Proposal to help with marketing makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Anything further? I'll call the question on that one. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Okay.
Right down the list.
Yep.
Brant Lake. 31,000.
Is that a motion?
I'll make that a motion.
Okay. There a second? We can discuss it without a second. I don't remember exactly what this one was. Beth?
I think they want to do Priscilla Core.
Oh. Okay. Up in Brant Lake. Okay.
I'm sorry, what did Beth say?
Priscilla Core treatment. It's an herbicide to fight milfoil. I don't know if they have a permit to do that.
They're working.
They're working on it. Yeah, Ethan, you might know more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good project. How it fits in with ARPA might be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, there's certainly a need for it.
Larry,
is this a for-profit or a non-profit?
It's a not-for-profit. It's a lake association. They steward the water quality on Brant Lake out of Oregon, and they've been dealing with Eurasian milfoil for years. The treatment they're recommending is the one that the Lake George Park Commission is trying to get permitted for in Lake George, and they've been tangled up in some lawsuits.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Question for either Wayne or Ethan. What are the other towns doing with the lakes to deal with the milfoil problem? I know that we have Glen Lake and Queensbury. Maybe it's Sunnyside. I'm not sure, but most of those citizens have to pay for the treatments themselves. They're on that lake association. I'm just curious what the others do.
Yeah,
Lake, from my understanding, it's a pretty affluent set of residents that live on the lake, part-time or full-time. So I'm just curious how that works.
It's a mishmash. I mean, like we're working with some of the Scruton Lake communities on Department of State grants, lake associations do fundraising. Things like Lake George might get funding directly from the state. So it is a mixed bag. It's pretty expensive. I mean, I'm always going to be an advocate for water quality in the county. It's a backbone to a lot of our property values, having clean water, which drives a lot of our economy, our recreation economy as well, and environmental health.
So do we know if they've applied, if you don't mind, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Have they applied for any state grants for this? Do we know?
It's my understanding that they're looking at a variety of funding options for this. I mean, right now, they're being proactive in trying to address water quality issues. They have a grant application into the state for a watershed management plan, which would give them the policies and programs necessary to start tackling this and applying for state funding.
My sense would be to hold off.
Frank,
Yes, Cor has been applied to Lake Sunnyside and I believe to Minerva Lake. It's very effective. Our folks at Soil and Water do scuba diving and have gone back, and it kills most of the milfoil.
Ray?
Do you know, Ethan, if they've talked the Adirondack Watershed Institute?
You know, I'm not positive, but I know that the Brant Lake Foundation or Brant Lake Association, you know, they have made some good presentations to the Park and Town Board. So, I mean, if I'm sure we could communicate with them and ask them to come in and clarify their ask, if that is something that the ARPA committee is interested in.
The reason I ask is I know Watershed Institute, and I'm somewhat removed, a couple of years removed from working with them directly, but they received a $10 million grant from DOH to address water quality in lakes throughout the Adirondacks, and they're working with, I don't know, 120 or 130 lake associations.
Wow.
Now,
yeah.
So it might be worth reaching out.
I think that's
Yeah.
Wayne, then I'll come to you, Jim.
Larry brought up, asked the question, and Brant Lake is a man-made lake. It's privately owned. I don't know. I can't tell you that this management group is a not-for-profit group without looking into it further. So, I mean, it is a private lake and private ownership. So I don't know who owns the dam and all that. I think that's this organization does. So I think it bears looking into a little bit further to answer that question before we make a decision.
We could invite them in. I mean, we
can look at the property records and see and go from there. But
doesn't Brant Lake have public access?
It does.
So they're privately owned, but they have public access, whereas Sunnyside, which is privately owned, does not have public access. Yeah, I just want to get clear on that.
Yeah, and that always weighs into getting
Right.
public funding for stuff in the state.
Yeah, right.
Their website and GuideStar says they're a 501c3.
Okay.
Jim?
I was just in a meeting with the president or the leader of AWI, and I also attended their annual conference of the Association of Lake Associations. We made a presentation there. And the two things I can share with you are that the association is recommending this approach to all of its members and actually advocated that they seek funding through ARPA amongst other means to potentially do it. And that the AWI has indeed provided support to some of the communities, but not all the communities. It's consistent with whatever the plan is that they've already established with that particular lake and lake community. I think both the Horicon Lake Association or Brant Lake Association and the AWI would be happy to come and provide you with more information. I know they came to us thinking that we were a conduit to help provide their message here. That's why I met with them.
Rachel?
Thank you. I just have a process question. I'm on the dashboard. I can see the new applications that came in, but when I'm filtering it to say I want to see all of them so I can pull up their application, I'm not seeing anything. So I'm assuming we've retained all this information in the dashboard so that we could go back and certainly it's a public document, but how do I get back to the first applications?
I think Sarah made it so that we can't do that right now.
That's Sarah can very quickly change it. If she's watching right now, she can probably do it in about 5 minutes.
She's in another meeting at 3:30, so I don't know how long that's going to be.
But yeah, rest assured, all of those applications, we've retained all the information. I think the decision to filter out the old ones was because on the agenda, we were going to be discussing, well, I think the idea was that we're going to be reviewing some of the new applications and digging into the weeds with those, but that's still there.
May I just make the request that we all have access to all the applications that have been submitted to state?
Yeah, I think we could just set up another link with a filter on or off. Okay. The reason that those old ones were taken off was just for clarity's sake, not having the 80 something there as we looked at the new ones that came in since the last meeting. But yeah, we can reopen access to all those applications very quickly.
Sarah just messaged me saying she can take the filter off.
Exactly, yeah. It's like better than Siri. Yeah.
She is, yeah. Doug, I I guess ask you if you want to hold off on this one.
We could table that until if they're gonna come in and talk about it. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
More than happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, we attend the Warren County Water Quality Committee meetings. You know, and we, you know, the planning department runs a program for the Schroon Lake watershed, and you look at the numbers that it costs for the municipalities to deal with milfoil. The ideal status is to get into management, where you're just dealing with little bits of milfoil as they arise, versus just being on like triage, where you have huge mats of it, cost phenomenal amounts of money. And people just have a hard time getting the staff to even do the hand harvesting and the vacuum harvesting. So yeah, the Priscilla Core has a lot of merits to it. I know it gets contentious with the whole Lake George issue, but to your point, you know, Minerva Lake, a lot of these smaller lakes, it's been really effective.
Yeah, it's very effective.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hold off on that one.
Okay, so you either need to withdraw the motion or motion to table.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Yeah, Doug's just gonna withdraw it. Thank you. Okay, so the next one there you see is on the table for EDC housing.
I'll bring that.
Okay,
Second.
are we doing it at the 15,000?
Oh, no, I was gonna say the 50,000. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think Ethan and Wayne know, and some others may know, that we do have a housing study underway, but without a lot of advocacy for this at the public level, it may not go through. It may be one of those studies that end up sitting on a shelf and not get implemented. So this organization, EDC, that's currently led by Jim Siplon, has been great in terms of reaching out, getting engaged with not only the individuals in the towns, but our representatives at the state level and other state organizations that help make these things happen. So to me, my recommendation is to do the whole thing. It's much less than some of the other awards that we've done. And I think the returns are going to be significantly higher on a per capita basis. So hopefully everyone can support this.
Ray, I think you seconded it.
Yep.
Is that at that amount?
Yes, I
You're
would agree with that. And I would also say, as a representative from the region's largest employer, that we see issues with this every single day. And so I absolutely support 50,000.
Rachel?
I wish there was some type of a compromise here, since based on the scoring of the applications, the amount was 30,000, and then based on the formula, it would have been 15. I could be supportive of it at 30, but for various reasons, that would be a compromise for me. I think the 50 is, again, going back on the scoring applications and the work everyone did on those and what we're looking at, and then there was an additional formula provided. We have small businesses to the tune of maybe $5,000-$10,000 that were denied funding to try to get them up and off of the ground as small businesses. And that's the studies. We continue to see studies done, and we continue to put them on back shelves. So, I mean, I could get to 30, but I'm going to be opposed to it at 50, because frankly, that extra 20 would have funded 2 of our small businesses that will literally close down because we weren't able to help them.
I saw a hand over here. Ethan, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think the $50,000 ask, I understand the application process where it got knocked down. I mean, realistically, we should be allocating, in my mind, $1 million for housing from ARPA funds to address, implementation of the housing needs assessment that we're going to be producing. Hopefully by this, we'll have a complete report sometime this spring. But I would certainly support, $50,000, but with the caveat that it would be good to have it coordinated with the housing study that the county's doing. We've already allocated resources for it. So at least the messaging is consistent. So we're all on the same page. So these efforts add on to what, Beth's organization is doing, what our planning department is doing, what EDC is doing. So we at least have a unified front and messaging on housing.
I'm not sure we need to modify the motion. I think that's a given, but we need to modify the motion to make sure that the EDC is tied with the planning department and with Beth's organization. I think that's easily done.
I think it makes sense to
done, right? So
put it in the resolution and have that be part of our documentation.
Sure, I don't see any issue. If I may ask, Mr. Siplon, if he sees any problem with it, but
yeah, he's saying no.
Okay.
We report to you every month, and we're happy to provide whatever connection and reporting.
Thank you.
I think the idea is that we have close coordination so that as the housing study is coming out, you can use that information to accurately convey whatever's in the housing study. Am I speaking correctly, Ethan?
Yeah. I mean,
we don't want that to be out there.
Silver bullet, Jim's efforts aren't going to be silver bullet. It's an ongoing effort. It's going to take all hands on deck. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Doug?
Yeah, I've made this comment before, but this housing shortage, a large portion is self-inflicted. Let me say that again, self-inflicted in Warren County. Each town has their own or does not have their own short-term rental laws. Currently, we have 18.5% of all homes in Warren County short-term rental. What happens when short-term rental occurs is it takes the house out of the housing market. So if we only had half of that amount of short-term rentals back in the housing market, we'd have no housing shortage. We've increased the number of units significantly in the last 10 years in houses. We significantly increased the amount of rental units in Warren County. And yet we've gone up 54 people. So let me reiterate, the housing shortage in my mind, to one degree, and I'm not saying all, is self-inflicted. And then you say, well, let's pour millions of dollars in it to fix our own self-inflicted problem. I'm a common sense guy. If we're the problem, we're also the solution. So, I fight this in my head. We create the problem and we say, well, let's pour millions of dollars to fix the problem. We are the problem. We, Warren County and the towns are the problem. Queensbury is taking an initiative. Wow, Lake George has a very strict short-term rental policy, and they don't seem to have that issue. Queensbury now recently implemented, soon be law, I believe, in 30 days or 60 days, the short-term rental law. That will change things because we have a lot of short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. That's almost obscene to me to have neighbors on both of you having different people every single weekend coming and going. And they don't adhere to the 10 or 11 o'clock noise ordinance because they're here on vacation. They're not here to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Newsflash. So, and I don't begrudge that. But the fact of the matter is we have created this problem to a degree. I'll support this resolution. Okay, but the EDC is funded. We give them over $350,000. And I've always thought that part of that money we give them, just Warren County gives them, over $350,000 a year. I thought part of that money was to advocate for certain things like housing, like broadband. I thought that was part of what we as a county were giving them money for, to do that advocacy. So this one I'll support, but the other one for broadband, I'm going to have to stay at 15,000 on that because I think we should be using some of the $750,000 we give them now to fund some of these things that they're currently doing. And even Jim said, if we don't do it, we're still doing it. So that's good. I was glad to hear him say that.
Is there any other discussion? Otherwise, I'm going to go back around again. Okay, Supervisor Wild.
Madam Chair, thank you. And I'll do my best to be brief, but I have to respond to what the prior speaker mentioned. Yeah, short-term rentals are a problem, but they're here to stay. And I think that if we just say it's all about the short-term rentals, it's misrepresenting the fact that we have a lifestyle here and a regional quality of life that has attracted many, many people out of the high density metropolitan areas downstate that once COVID hit, they came here. And it's not just for private short-term rentals. They actually relocated here. And there's big data to support that. So it's a complicated factor that we have, and we'll see it when the housing study, I believe, comes out. But I'm appreciative of the support for this, at least first piece of the EDC funding. Thank you.
Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, just for clarity, like I said, I didn't say it was the total issue, short-term rental. So I'm sorry if my colleague misunderstood, but I said it's a piece of it. And I'll say it again, it's a piece of it. It's a major piece, but it's a piece of it. There's other issues involved, and I get it. Thank you.
All right, not seeing anything else. I'll call the question on this one. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
I have one opposed. 6, 7, that carries.
With Frank Walkway.
I still have 7.
Okay.
Okay. I would suggest we skip to the textbooks.
Can I? Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Bramer. I'm just struggling a little bit with our decision to withdraw the motion for Brant Lake, and I'm struggling with it because we've reviewed the applications. We've scored them, but when I look back at their application, they weren't only crystal clear on why they were asking for it. The issue here remains, did they get the permit? And perhaps the funding could be contingent on if in fact the permit was obtained. But they submitted a PowerPoint, a detailed budget, and an explanation that based on what we looked at has a significant impact throughout Warren County. They go on to talk about so I guess what I'm saying is that they were looking at starting this at the beginning of the summer. I don't know what our meeting schedule is going to be, but if it's not awarded this month and you're into next month, as they're trying to secure dollars to be able to make this happen, it might put them in a really bad position. And I guess my thought would be, is there a way to move it to the full board and ask them to come and talk at the full board at privilege of the floor about whatever questions people have above and beyond what's been given to us? But they, to the supervisor from Queens, a very specific question, and they answered in the application, this downgrade in water quality threatens the economic visibility that a healthy Brant Lake supports, numerous rental properties, 3 marinas, 3 heritage youth family camps, and over 37 local businesses also at risk. And it goes on to talk about additional areas. And they provide map information, cost. I mean, it's an incredibly detailed application. I would just, now that we have a chance to look back at the full applications and remind ourselves, I worry that by putting this into next year's cycle, does that impact their ability to actually get this done given the decrease? And they go on to talk about the decrease in membership and the decrease in donations. So, many times we're seeing, and I don't think you talked about it, Chairwoman, at the beginning, but we're starting to see a lot of applications that are going to the full board and failing. So this might be one that if we proceed forward, if the will is there of the committee and ask Brant Lake to come in at the full board meeting, I don't know, contingent on getting the permit. I just wanted to draw our attention back to the fact that they submitted everything we asked them to and more. And in case that makes a difference to anyone here, now that we can see it.
Yeah, you're right. They have provided quite a bit of information. I mean, I personally saw their last presentation. I'm comfortable with the information they provided, but I don't. Everyone has to look at that.
Doug, do you want to bring that back?
I'll bring the motion back onto the floor for the 31,000 because I think the supervisor from Queensbury makes some very, very valid points. We've already scored it. We've read it. They've given us thorough and detailed information. I'll
second that.
I think we're ready.
All right.
If I may.
Yes.
My only concern with that would be, this is partial funding. Can they still go forward with partial funding? Do they still have a project? And that would be the only caveat that I would ask of them. How does this impact what they propose to do?
Yeah. Gina,
they do address.
Gina, was this one of the ones that you reached out to about that? No. Okay. Yeah, because it was just small businesses. Okay. Well, we can certainly, I know that that's something that we've looked into even as recently as today, having this discussion with the county attorney's office as to these applications and making sure the funding is used fully. So
Right.
I don't think that's a major problem that would impede us from voting on it today.
No, I just wanted to bring it up as
Mhm.
part of the concerns, but I'm still in favor of moving this forward.
Okay. Let me just, was there anybody else? Ray, you had a hand up before.
No, I was just gonna, I agree with what Supervisor Seaver
Okay,
said completely.
okay, yes.
And to Wayne's point, that information, they do allude to that in their application if they, but the issue here is just if they're only getting 31 based on everything that they submitted here, I think they, if they're even getting that, should know that so they can look at their targeting areas for donations a little bit differently than what they have proposed of the total project cost. But just given the timeline of how quickly it's coming up, you know, government can be very slow and lots of red tape. So I appreciate the consideration. I just want to be fair to the application process. And I would bring that as a motion forward, contingent on their ability to obtain the permit. I know nothing about what you're talking about, Beth, but whatever Beth said.
Well, I took Doug's motion back off the floor, so I'll consider that a second. Sure. Okay, is there any discussion on this application?
Yeah,
Supervisor Cloud?
I do. And not to say that I'm against this, I just don't understand about the other lakes. So we're going to get in the same situation that we came into with the EMS, where other EMS is saying, what about us? And I'm just curious, are we going to get ourselves in that kind of box that's going to slow us down even worse? I don't know. I'd like to move slowly on this to get a better sense. And I'm not sure how to get that better sense, but we've stumbled before.
Well, I think that we have not stumbled.
Right.
I think that we got caught up in the Board of Supervisors process, and we have applications in front of us. We have tried to score those as carefully as we can, and this is the only application we have in front of us for this thing.
Right.
We do have other lakes in the county, but we don't have applications from other lake associations. Is there any other discussion on this application? Larry?
I just wanted to clarify to make sure we're all on the same page, and I'm just going to the eligible use so everyone can hear it before you vote. The category is assistance to nonprofit organizations, which would include a program or a service, including a grant to mitigate financial hardship, such as declines in revenues or increased costs or technical assistance. So you're approving this funding for the purposes of the entities to mitigate their financial hardship, such as declines in revenues or increased costs or technical assistance. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
And they
Technical assistance or?
You don't necessarily have to pick one of the three, but as long as in your mind, you're comfortable that it fits in that category.
Increase costs.
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
So right now it says assistance to small business. So you're saying, Larry, that we should move it into the assistance to nonprofits.
It is, and I did check it also on the New York State Department of State, and they're registered with the state of New York as a nonprofit entity. So.
All right. Any further discussion on this one? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention, that carries.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just be blunt. I'm not sure what to do about the SUNY Adirondack one. So I was going to jump over to the SUNY Plattsburgh textbook application.
I'd make a motion that we just approve that prorated amount.
The 16,000 one?
Yes.
16,854.65.
Correct.
Do I have a second?
Sure.
Frank? Is there any discussion on this one? You guys see which one we're on? Okay. Yes, Supervisor Seaver.
Madam Chairwoman, I have to recuse myself from this vote. Not because,
Yep. Is there any further discussion on this one? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries with one recusal or abstention. Recusal. Okay. The Warrensburg one, I believe, falls into the other category of the premium pay. We decided we were not going to move forward with that in general.
Correct.
So I'm gonna skip over that one too. And go to this one. Okay, this is the water quality monitoring.
Yeah, this one, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Spoke to, and Beth, in her knowledge of water quality in the area, speak to this too. MS4, municipal separated storm sewer systems. Basically, there's federal requirements that are administered also on the state level, in which we have a responsibility to look at our waterways, look how we're possibly getting runoff into our waterways that could impair water quality. This lake monitoring equipment is fairly inexpensive, but it will help the Soil and Water Conservation District help our municipalities comply with federal and state mandates, which are all good. Basically, this equipment will make us more efficient at monitoring water quality and doing our obligatory reports to the state and federal government.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
For the 8,000, or do you want to fund them the full 11,600?
I'm inclined to the 11,600. I'm because it is it's a fairly cut and dry application. That's it's for equipment, and it is an organization that's very closely related to the county. This isn't it's such a modest ask for what it is.
Okay, 11,600. Is there a second?
A second.
Mike, okay. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, do you know about the weather monitoring one, Ethan?
Yeah, this is another one I think that OES and I had mentioned along with Jim Liebram at Soil and Water Conservation District. Again, it was going to have a weather station in the middle of Warren County, so we could have real-time updates on what's going on with the weather. And I think this would be, as I understand it, be good for emergency response and preparedness as well.
Does anyone want to make a motion there, Doug?
Yeah, I'll make a motion for the full amount.
For the 3,000? Okay. Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Okay. And broadband.
I'll make that motion. Full amount.
Okay, is there a second? Ray? Okay, discussion.
And if I may, just add a little bit more to what Jim has said prior. One of the things that they've been able to do is bring the North Country together as a region to apply for the federal grants. And we know, and you may have heard this already before, but Warren County is in good shape in terms of the penetration of broadband within our area. But to go that final mile and get some of the other homes connected, it's still going to take some effort and some money. If we're going to stand on our own as Warren County to try to get this federal funding, there'll probably be a lot of other organizations and counties and regions that will stand out having much higher need for us. But by being combined with the Adirondacks as a whole, it gives us better leverage to try to get some support to take us further and get some of that federal funding. And if I haven't misspoken, maybe Jim can correct me if I'm wrong. Can't really tell. Am I?
Let's just.
Okay. Well, all right. Thank you. But I'm done. Thanks.
No, that's okay. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, let's have discussion among the committee first. Anybody else? Doug?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the EDC and broadband to the 15,250, which the committee scored and it felt was appropriate. As Jim even mentioned, if he doesn't get the full 50, since we give him over $250,000 every year, he would still go forward with his advocacy for broadband for the whole area. So I think Warren County is a super supporter of EDC, obviously by the amount of dollars we give. The town of Queensbury gives over $110,000 every year. So, you know, over 460,000 a year. I think we're doing what we need to do to support the EDC and its broadband advocacy. So I won't support 50,000, but I will support 15,250, which the committee saw fit to award.
Anybody else before I go back? Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you. I'm inclined to agree with my colleague from Queensbury, and I say this because at the last meeting I brought up concerns regarding this 50,000. You all were copied on an email back from Sarah, who talked about the ability of our planning department to maintain some of this data as well. And it seemed like there was some overlap in the request for funding from what the planning department was doing, much, in my opinion, kind of like the housing survey. I get that we want to cover all angles, but these dollars should be treated with such a attention to detail and care, especially knowing the enormous requests that have come through on top of the need for mental health services. So for me, while I would say no to all of it, I would get behind that 15,000 that the formula provided us, recognizing the immense amount of money that comes from not only Warren County into EDC, but also some dollars from the city of Glens Falls and the town of Queensbury. So, and I also believe that North Creek is a member as well and pays some fees from that perspective. So I hope there's a compromise to 15, but if not, I'll be opposed to this now and at the full board meeting.
Supervisor Wild.
Madam Chair, thank you. I just feel it's important to correct some of the statements that were made previously. They are correct in stating that Queensbury and Glens Falls does give money to the EDC, but that money is directed at projects specifically related to the town of Queensbury. And my belief is that Glens Falls funding is specifically for Glens Falls. What the EDC has done was take the broadband that we had when the pandemic hit, for my guess to be probably around 60%, if not less penetration, to 90%, or around those numbers. That was done primarily by the efforts of the EDC. They're asking to continue this, to advocate at the state level, the federal level, and region-wide to make this happen. They put a lot of money into making this happen, and I think it's appropriate for us to at least reimburse and consider to move forward with an organization that thinks about the county as a whole, not individual towns specifically. So I'm not prepared to change my motion, but I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee in terms of how they feel about this.
Supervisor Sieber.
I don't need this to be coming back and forth, and that's not my intent on this. I never said what is represented, whether it's for or not for a town or a city. The point is we are Warren County. And what I'm basing it on is the response we got back from the planning department and the dollars that are invested into our EDC. I think we should look at it as the county, but in no way, shape, or form am I saying I'm aware of what the projects are that are targeted, other than the support that we give generally. So again, you know, if we're not going to compromise, fine. I just wanted to let you know why I was where I am with this. I think that's part of the problem of what's happening when these proposals move forward and they're getting voted down is people, we aren't explaining why. And that's very frustrating for applicants. So I'm glad Jim's here to hear why, but I did want it on the public record.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Please, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
What are we voting on? Where are we?
This,
No, what amount?
I think we were still at the 50,000 that was requested, the full amount.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Supervisor Bramer.
So I'm trying to be very objective in my chair role, not to sway discussion. And so I will not provide a reason. My vote is no.
Okay. Supervisor Sieber.
No.
Wayne Lamoth.
No.
Ray Agnew.
Yes.
Beth Gillis.
Abstain.
Supervisor Thomas.
Yes.
Supervisor Beatty,
No.
Supervisor Wild,
Yes.
and Ethan Gaddy.
I'm gonna abstain.
The motion fails.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I think
I'd like
people are indicating a willingness to provide funding. If you're willing to.
Another motion, I would probably second it, but I believe that based on my thought, I'm looking for people to compromise. 15,000 is less than the how much did give me a second. Mr. Sipper mentioned they put in 50,000 already, 30,000 in the original mapping and 20,000 for the lobbying that they did. That would be considered lost revenue. So I'm open to suggestions. It's worth the effort. So I'll leave it to the rest of the committee to decide what that level should be.
Throughout this discussion, I think we've kind of deviated from it, but I go back to the rating and ranking that we did initially when, there's a 22% priority rating to this by the committee as a whole. It came out ranked 23rd, tied for 23rd for its funding recommendation. So, I think there's merit to what they do, but I would make a motion for the 15,250.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion on that motion. Supervisor Sieber.
Just a procedural question, if I can ask either Sarah or Larry. Does it substantially change, when one motion is put forward, when it wasn't amended, is it substantially changing the next motion? So per the rules, is it allowed?
I'll defer to you.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Sure. A motion, while there was a request for an amend, it was denied, it was voted on, it failed. So the next step is typically, if it's brought back forward, it has to be substantially changed. I know there's been different interpretation of what that means. Is changing the dollar amount sufficient for a substantially changed?
I don't know that there's a legal answer, as I believe that's a Robert's rules question, and my area of specialty is not Robert's rules. So I don't want to necessarily quote unquote cop out on the answer, but I think it's up to the committee to determine whether that was a substantial change in it, given that the focus of the entire conversation seems to be more or less about the dollar amount. It would seem to be, this isn't a legal opinion, but it would seem the committee has a good basis to believe that the new number is a substantial change, then it is.
I'm willing to make a ruling on this if that's necessary. Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Frank?
This is one of the main focuses of this ARPA money was broadband. So I don't understand why we're nickel and diming it when it's one of the main focuses that when the federal government put this together and put it out is broadband, expansion of broadband, and the related things. So to me, I think, some of the other awards that we've made are a lot more questionable than this. I don't understand why we're nickel and diming this.
Anybody else?
Call question.
Yeah, Beth.
What about the 30,000 to pay the EDC back for the money they spent on the ECC mapping? Can we meet in the middle between the 15 and the 50 on that?
Is that a motion to amend?
Sure.
I would agree to that.
Okay. Who made the second? I think Doug did.
Mr. Beatty.
So you're proposing that we amend it to 30? That's twice the amount that obviously the score dictated. And as Wayne clearly pointed out, 22% tied for 23rd of this committee's who did read and score the applications felt. But in the spirit of compromise, Beth, I will amend my second to 30,000.
Thank you. And Wayne did as well.
Correct.
Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you. I just, in the spirit of transparency, I highly doubt I'll support it at the full board, but for purposes of here today and wanting to compromise, I know that's not what they asked for in the application. I'm not nickel and diming them from the perspective of we're doing a lot of, it feels repetitive after talking with Sarah and after hearing some comments and you know, learning more and more about this. So again, we're already investing quite a bit of money in a time where I'm told it's very difficult to be doing so. So I hope we look with the spirit of compromise at many of these other applications in the same way. So.
Okay, I'll call the question at the 30,000 for broadband. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. And the recycling facility. I don't think we have an answer from the relevant committee on that one, so I would say let's just skip over that one for now too. Anybody? Yes?
I did have a chance to touch base with Kevin.
Okay. Oh, good.
And he did present it back to the committee. And I think there was a general, I believe you said that committee. Right. So there was a general discussion of the idea, but I don't know if I'm misreading the meeting. Was there a full endorsement of the 1.4 million, or was it
by the facilities of debt? I would say, yeah, there was, or by the DPW committee, I would say. That they were, I think for the most part, were in favor of. I don't know, you know, we're going to get the 1.4 million.
Right.
I missed that. Did the committee actually refer it back to ARPA?
I think so.
It was, yeah, it was kind of a little volleyball kind of. I mean, what I didn't get out of it, and I don't know if we were specific enough in asking the other committee about, you know, we didn't give them options, and I don't know if we were clear enough. And hey, does the committee fully support a $1.4 million expenditure on something that's going to be a county facility for going into the future? So I don't know if we have to exercise some degree of we break it off into pieces, or
Wayne?
Just as a matter of course, the department did not receive a referral from the clerk of the board that this was to be referred back. So we have no official referral. I know there was discussion, but that's why it's kind of a limbo status. What really happened, I don't know.
I just checked the minutes, and it does look like the consensus of the committee, the Public Works Committee, was to refer the application back to the ARPA Advisory Committee for consideration.
Okay, we did not receive that.
Okay, so well, we can leave it pending for further consideration. Yes, Ethan?
I mean, I guess we should clarify then what it is exactly, what information we need in order to make a decision, or what we would need from a different committee in order for us to make a decision on this. If we're going to pass it off to a different committee again, or if we're going to take action just to figure out what information we need, so we can at least work with either DPW or someone else to figure out next steps.
I think we move on and come back at the next meeting with some more information. You know, I think we need to look at the minutes from the meeting, look at the tape, see what the actual discussion involved. I have not looked at it. I think Ethan has seen part of it, maybe, and talked to Kevin, but other than those that were there, Frank.
I think part of it was the actual facility, a building, and some equipment for banding plastic and cardboard and etc. I think part of it was a couple of roll-off trucks to haul recyclables throughout the county. That was what was talked about, and they talked about a piece of property in Lake George, by the Lake George transfer area in that region.
It was, you're right, like co-locating on the existing transfer station property.
Right, we're right next to it. Yep.
Does anybody have any other questions they want to raise now? We can try to gather that information or we can just come back to it. Yep. Rachel.
In my mind, Claudia, all I keep hearing is what Frank said a few meetings ago, which was we tried this. Well, I don't know exactly what you said, but it was to the extent of like, we had did this, it failed. We're so why not? You know, of course, we're going to talk about doing it again. And I'm all for improving the process.
It's called insanity.
I think you did say that. Yeah. So I would much rather hear why it, you know, like what were the pitfalls? Why didn't it work? How are we going to do this differently if we're going to do it differently, and a plan. And also, is the county committed to investing the money on an year by year basis? I mean, ARPA is going to be a one-time event. Yeah. So what's going to happen? Where's the money coming from, Mr. Budget Officer? You know, like that's my concern with so many other competing interests. And, you know, what has changed in the landscape now that this will be successful? And frankly, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but we've heard so much about mental health. We know a dire need at our local hospital, and that's a couple $1 million. So if we're going to invest in something that's ground ready to go and address a huge need in our community regarding mental health, I'm going to put my weight and my vote and my support behind them. And I hope that the Warren County Board of Supervisors will continue to diligently look at whatever the success or failures were in the past, and if they'd like to repeat them.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think that's information we need to figure out.
Maybe perhaps, I mean, because I looked at their application recently and some of the plans around it, which I think is pretty well considered. Maybe looking at assessing the risks of the operation. I don't necessarily think that it would pay for itself, or we should necessarily expect it to pay completely for itself, because it is, you know, dealing with solid waste, which is a big issue. I mean, right now we're burning a lot of our garbage that doesn't get recycled, and that's environmental risk in and of itself. So maybe detailed information on the recyclables market, you know, and the idea of what it is going to take to staff this thing over 10 or 15 years, the lifetime of the facility. Would that help us make a decision?
I know one area was the hauling of just the recyclables and the garbage. The rates have increased here will in 2023 to the point where it would be cheaper for the county to have their own trucks and hire 2 or 3 people and do it that way, and then charge the municipalities a rate that would be more beneficial to them. That was one area. As far as the MERV or the recycling facility, I don't know, you know, that's all market. You know, if you have a market for plastic and cardboard and stuff, it might be great, but they go up and down. And, you know,
yeah,
we have done this before.
Bye, Gina. We'll bring you up to date.
I would ask that we move on to the EMS and the other applications if we're going to deal with those today.
Okay, we can do that. There's one more though on our action agenda I want to address. This is the mental health toolkit. We had a presentation from NACO because the people from the National Council for Wellbeing were not available that day. And this resolution has already passed the full Board of Supervisors. Unfortunately, the resolution came out to award the funding to NACO, which is not the correct legal entity. We need, according to our county attorney, an amendment to that resolution 500 to name the National Council for Wellbeing.
So moved.
Thank you, Wayne. Could I have a second? Thank you, Beth.
It has to come from this committee?
I think that's easiest if we push it up through from our committee to the full board.
Right.
It's simply an amendment to the existing resolution. It's not changing dollar amounts, not changing the program.
I saw it. That entity is the legal entity that we're going to be giving money to.
Yes. Hey. All right, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Okay. We talked about the community service board. So yes, let's go to the EMS and the VFW applications, requests for ARPA funding. I mean, all of these have come in afterwards, after the deadline. I know there's some concern about the VFW one. Did submit an initial application way back when. So Is there any appetite by the committee to award the funding to all of them, excluding the fire tanker at 450,000? Or should we go through individually?
Make a motion that we put them all in the same except for the tanker.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could second that with a modification that we jointly talk about what percentage we support them at.
Well,
I didn't quite understand exactly the percentages that we were going to be doing. I wasn't going to do full. If we do full, what are we talking about? 200,000?
I can add it up real quick. Hold on. $52, 3, 40,000. 13.
240 plus, I think.
I gotta sum it.
Oh, wait, what's 75?
Well, 75, 36, 990, 52, 3, 40,000, a 40,000, a 13,5 is 332,790. If you, that was, so that's a full funding. If you don't want to support that, I'll see if anyone else on the committee wants to.
I was thinking 80%.
Who made the initial motion?
Ray did. He's suggesting that we fund them all at 80% of their requests.
Ethan, what was your question?
Oh, I was just back for clarification, Ray. I for a second I didn't know if he was saying we set a standard amount of like 40,000 or something like that, but
he's saying a percentage amount.
Yeah.
Beth?
We used 50,000 as a cap with the small businesses because of paperwork. I guess that was not a right way to say it. Reporting requirements. So maybe that would be a cap and then go down from there like we did too. I mean, everybody else got some form of percentage.
Okay. All right. So let's hold off on that, Ray. Is that okay with you?
Yep.
Okay. All righty. So Rachel, sorry. Saw your hand earlier. Yes.
Chairwoman, my concern lies within having reviewed these applications on the portal, and I see some of us did, and there were some questions and some concerns. I guess I'm wondering if we're just going to be back in the same boat with being told that we've stumbled or we've missed something, or we're not being responsible when we're looking at these allocations, because many of these applications are not complete. While they could be worthwhile applications for us to talk about, even the tanker, I think, but I had a lot of questions about where the budget, many of them said, where's your budget? And the budget wasn't even there, or there were acronyms that were never explained, or, some of this, when we're talking about radios and stretchers, I think those are total needs. But I mean, I couldn't even open an Excel doc to see the budget. I want to hear from our OES department on why aren't we already helping? Like, that's a bigger problem for me. And many of these, so we're going to give what, 30 grand, 40 grand towards an ambulance that's needed for 143,000. Are they going to still be able to use that for that dedicated purpose? Because we're going to go back and say, hey, we want your after action reports. Did you use the money in the way? I'm certain our county attorney will make sure that we're following up and saying, did you use the money in the way that you said you would in your contract, in your application? And when they say, but I couldn't, because you only gave me 20 or 30 grand towards a need that I have for 200 or 140 or whatever it is, maybe the better approach is to look at this collectively, include all of the EMS districts. And I know that Craig Leggett, who I don't see here today, was going to go to the EMS advisory committee last meeting. He had asked for some clarification on what he could bring to them and say, if we give a pot of money towards these needs, how could it be used? The same thing I saw over and over about shared purchasing. And is there a way to collectively unite behind this? I mean, this is we've gone through these applications, and I'm hopeful that everyone, maybe we need a little more time to look at these applications in more detail, but to just throw a formula out there of 80%, which is so different than the formula we use for every other application. Should it be 100% and should it be just general funding? I don't know those answers, but I do know these aren't complete. And I don't know why we're not going back to them and asking. And there seems to be a lot of hands. So I'm done talking. Thank you.
Okay, hold on, Larry. One thing I do want to say is that I did follow up with Craig after the EMS meeting and beforehand and asked him about, was there a general request from the EMS community or a unified request? And they did not have one. Their suggestion was that let us each submit our own applications, and that's what they did. And I do not believe there are any EMS agencies that have not been asked to submit. EMS agencies. I did not go out and ask fire departments, and I did not ask that didn't also have an EMS. I didn't ask the VFW either. Larry. Oh, and I want to say one more thing. Larry's office is not planning on doing the follow-up per se. It would be through the planning department.
Not only are we not planning, we will not be doing any following up. It's not within the scope of our work. And once the contract is signed, we are referring that individual or that entity over to planning, and we are done unless there's an issue, problem, or complaint that arises after that. I just wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding on that.
Oh, there is a misunderstanding, absolutely. But thank you for clarifying that.
Wayne.
And thank you for that, Larry. You know, we appreciate that. I would look at this and say the EMS applications came in. I liked most of them. All right. But looking at the rating and ranking, only 4 people on this committee have actually reviewed these and provided a score. I think we need more participation from the committee looking at and doing the ranking and scoring on these to get a real sense of what still needs to be out there, what needs to be supplied. I know there are some good comments. One of my personal ones is, I think it was alluded to, if they need 250,000 for an ambulance, they're asking for 75. Where's the rest of it coming from? And my personal opinion is we should not give them any money. We can allocate it, but we should not release any funds until they show that the other funds are in place, because this money should not go and sit in some EMS bank account for a year or two while they wait to try to raise the rest of the money. So that's just a point I want to bring along, but I would like to see more ranking and more rating done by other members of the committee.
Ray?
I think that's a good point, Wayne. I did score them.
Yes.
I didn't comment on all of them. The one comment I did put in was these applications are incomplete, but these are important organizations and they, working for the hospital, we need them. I did talk to not all, but a couple of the heads of the smaller EMSs. One of them told me that they missed the first round because they get so many things from .govs that they're sick of, that they routed all their .gov emails to their junk file, so they never saw the email. I don't know what to make of that, but anyway, they're essential to the communities they serve, and they're essential to us at the hospital. So I gave them some leeway. I scored a bunch of them low, but still said I thought that they were priorities because there was so little information. But I think Wayne makes a good point. Maybe we should defer and ask more people to take a look at them, and that would give us a chance to get back to those that are like one of them was just an application with no budget at all, and maybe more than one, but one sticks in my mind that just really was a paragraph. Ask them to really do the application.
Mike.
Thanks. I read all these. I didn't score them, but I did read them all. I supported most of them. Now, the one that I had an issue with, and I'm not sure if it was, and I don't recall it now, whether it was Glens Falls or maybe Bolton, but someone in their application actually mentioned that they have a 10-year plan for replacing their vehicles. And my thought was, if you have a 10-year plan, you probably have the money for this already. So I was a little hesitant on that one, but the others I agreed were all valuable. But it was just a matter of what can we support going forward with the rest of the money we have left.
Can we agree on an amount to just as a pot to put aside so that it doesn't all get gobbled up in the conversations that we're about to have after this, and then just use that and everyone can get the information that makes them more comfortable with completed applications. I guess I don't know if anyone else is feeling this, but like, I feel like I know we have $2 million left, but we're getting down to that wire where I think that we're going to end up maybe not being able to fund some things because we've already agreed to other things. So we just do a pot.
It's a great idea
for EMS, whatever that dollar amount be.
Wayne,
I thought we had discussed, not maybe decided, but discussed the $250,000 pot. When the full board of supervisors recommended that we go back and look at other EMS activities, I thought there was a discussion. Again, I don't know that there was actually a decision to say that pot was 250,000, but I think that number was out there.
okay. Rachel.
I recall having that discussion, so I'm unclear why we're looking at applications that exceed the 50,000, which was something that, as Beth brought up, was because of the reporting requirements. But I also recall the chairwoman saying that you had asked them to keep it under a certain amount. Clearly, there's many applications here that well exceed what the request was from the chairwoman. But that being said, like I'm prepared on some of these. I can vote today. For instance, the Glens Falls one. I look at that and I think, I know I can read in their application the number of responses, why they're providing support throughout the county, what the type of need is, where they're going to find the gap funding. You know, I can look at that. But in terms of priority, we had this problem last time. Like none of us really understood what the column meant. And I see it's still there of, is this a priority? I mark no, they're not priorities, not because I don't think they're a priority in our community and desperately needed, but because that in the scope of what we got back in our survey results and the discussions we've had here, this came all after the fact. So I didn't want the priority to be the identifying factor of how we did the scoring like we did last time. So I don't know if we're all on the same page of how we're interpreting that question, because last time I said yes to everything, because to that organization, it's a priority. Absolutely. So I'd marked yes on everything and then it skewed the ratings. So I don't know if it's worth taking out that question and looking at the ratings based on the substantial information that's provided and the other scoring mechanisms. But at the appropriate time, I would like some guidance on that because I don't want that to negatively impact. I'm happy to make that a yes or a no. I don't know how it's going to be used. But that being said, I can go through these and I'm prepared, or I think the other thing too might be, are we looking at just 50 and below? Are we looking at the cap at 250? And my question with compliance is just simply someone's going to be making sure that what people say they're using it for is what they're using it for when it comes through. I always think that's a lawyer. So if it's not a lawyer and it's planning, then planning really needs to have a very comfortable hand on this. And I would defer to them on what they want to do with this. Because that, if you're just going to give them 50 grand to each EMS, I'm also going to ask that you go back to the two in Queensbury that didn't put in and say, if we're doing this for general funding, then they should be considered as well. Because the other two applications they had were a need for the entire county. And we modified them to provide a benefit to the whole county. One of them was showing up at the VAC center and providing support, which is providing support to all of our communities. So if we're going to do that and just do a general, here you go, use it as you see fit and report back on what category, then they should be included in that. I'm opposed to excluding two EMS. So that's where I'm at. Thank you. I know a lot. Ray?
First thing I'm going to do is withdraw my previous motion.
Okay. I think that was already what you
and then I'm going to editorialize for a second how frustrating it is to me. And I know there's nothing we can do about it, but you know, this committee did the hard work and then the Board of Supervisors decided, wait a minute, you didn't include all the EMSs, and that just it's incredibly frustrating. But now, based on the discussion today, I recall that same conversation, and 250 is what I remembered as well. And I was looking at them and dividing it up and coming up with 260 if we looked at like 40,000 each, which is something that Ethan had mentioned to me. So as a placeholder, I'd like to make a motion that we hold $250,000 EMSs and then come back to it.
Okay.
Better clarity, is that including the Chester one that we approved already or not including?
Including what one?
No, new ones.
New ones.
Right?
The new ones, yeah.
Right.
So just so we're clear, on my list, we had North Warren Emergency Squad, Bay Ridge Rescue Squad, Bay Ridge Fire Company, Warrensburg Emergency Squad, and West Glens Falls Emergency Squad have all been awarded funding. Now, what Supervisor, my colleague from Queensberry, was mentioning is that at least one of those was really for the pod during COVID and wasn't a separate award to that specific squad for anything else they might have incurred. So I did not reach out to them. The only ones I reached out to were the ones who we did not award any funding: Bolton, Empire, Glens Falls, Hague, Johnsburg, Lake George, Brockwell Falls, North Queensberry, and Stony Creek. Yes.
I'm happy to second that motion if you would consider amending it to include the two that were not reached back out to, which shouldn't be penalized for following our process and getting in their applications earlier.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So can we clarify which? That's West Glens Falls?
Right, and
Bay Ridge Rescue Squad?
Okay. Right, we're talking about EMSs.
Bay Ridge West Rescue Squad, theirs was 46,568. What was that?
Training to the entire county. I believe that was that one. We modified it to say if they were going to get that award, it couldn't be training just to Queensberry, that training had to be provided to all of the squads throughout the county.
Okay.
And so there was a county purpose to that. I wouldn't be doing my job as a Queensberry representative if I wasn't bringing it up if we're going to look at an inclusive list and just hand out some ARPA dollars for them to fall within I'm prepared to vote on that today, then, go ahead. Let's say 300 whatever and divide them equally and make sure we have everybody. But I think fair is fair.
Well, one of the reasons I think it's important that we have an application is so that we are not just awarding money to sit in their bank accounts. It's so that it can be used for a particular purpose. We're not just handing out.
We should be back to saying to applicants, please fill out all the questions on the application. That's not happening here.
We need something to judge performance by, that we can't just give them money and say, oh, well, as far as our reporting process and everything, we need to be able to identify that it was used for an eligible purpose. And to do that, we need them to tell us what that eligible purpose they're going to do with that money is, so that Gina can follow up on it when all is said and done. And we don't have an audit finding at the end.
Right. I mean, some of these to me are very straightforward. They want to buy a stretcher. That's an X number of dollars. I feel comfortable giving them the money to buy the stretcher, but let's get everybody on the same page and bring it back and try to.
I just want to be clear that I wasn't suggesting that we just give them unrestricted dollars, but rather that we hold that pot of money based on application.
Yeah, I got, yep.
I'm with you.
Okay. Yes.
And just in terms of being strategic with how we allocate this money, I know that we had tried to have it discussed by the EMS committee. And I don't think there's much of an appetite for that, but I would be more comfortable if, I'm a community planner. I'm not a specialist in EMS districts. So we could get some idea of their needs, but is there not someone that coordinates these groups on a county-wide or regional basis that could shed any light on this, the body of need? I think there's a lot of need, obviously, but I don't want to muddle up the process, but
it's the EMS committee, the broader committee for the county did meet, and I guess that's under Anne Marie Mason. You can ask her to give us some info on the broader need.
I don't know that we did that with every other category.
Yeah. But we have a motion and a second on the table for setting aside the money for EMSs in general, agencies, including the other two Queensberry ones.
So that total amount is increased by 80.
No.
Well, 260. You did the math, right?
What did you say? I thought it was 250.
250. And including two additional?
No, I mean, including them, but in the 250,000.
Right. Yeah, that's the entire pot of money to be split depending on that.
Rachel's asking that it be increased because we're adding two new districts or two new EMS groups.
So that would add another 70,000 roughly.
Ironically, it's about the same amount that we're talking about here today when we started the whole conversation. It's just with a lot of documentation, applications, answers to questions on forms, and inclusivity. So I'd second that if you change the motion to 320.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're gonna set us.
and you seconded it earlier?
No, I'm offering.
I
now.
forget who did. Somebody did.
I think I did.
It was,
get it on the floor.
yeah, it was Agnew was the main motion and then Seaver was the second.
Okay, all right. So everyone clear what we're doing?
Madam Chair, just so that I'm clear on this, I'd like to see it set aside for no more than 2 months, so we kind of get this done, right? Because there might be something else that pops up that says we need to do something else with this money.
I think that.
And it kind of puts a fire under the MS guys to get us the information and let us make a decision on these going forward.
I'm open. I think that's reasonable.
Okay. As much as I love meeting with you guys, let's bring this around. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. 320. Okay.
EFW. Was that included in it? That wasn't included in the
That
group.
wasn't included in there.
They have an ask of 13,500 for the replacement of their roof. Post 6196. Is that legally? Can we do that?
I don't see why not. It was based on lost revenues. They weren't able to hold some of their events.
That's right. That's right.
So I see that is a legitimate use.
I'd like to make a motion that we fund that fully.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Wayne, any discussion? Rachel?
Supervisor Bramer. It was said earlier that sometimes we stumble and we roll around, and I think that unfortunately that's part of government and it makes for a better process in the end. There was some confusion with the way our automated responses went and the process of which getting back out a full application. So this was a miscommunication, and it's one that I think we learned from and made a better process moving forward. And I hope we continue to do that, and I would support it.
Mr. Elman?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, well, but there's some, not everything.
Were we going to discuss the hospital
I
today?
would like to discuss the hospital, but we've been at this for 2 hours.
I'm sure I'd also like to bring up the Salvation Army again, if you don't mind.
Well,
we understand there's a time crunch for the shelter. Not for this year, but for next year. Because of the requirements of the state for fundings and approvals that have to happen. Is there any way that we could move this forward to the full board and ask that there be a request in front of the full board to have the individuals from both the Salvation Army and the Open Door to address some of the questions that came up earlier today? The prior supervisor, the prior comments from the supervisor of Queensbury brought up some good points. You know, why isn't the Open Door doing it? I understand why they may not want to do that, because the intermingling of the mental health situation of people trying to get back on track versus those that are still struggling in the middle of addiction or the like. But I'd like to see if we can move this forward to get the funding approved, to not delay for potentially a number of months that would impact the implementation next fall of this change. So I don't know enough about it to say yes or no, but I think we need to get some questions answered, but we need to move quicker on this.
Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you so much to my colleague from Queensbury at the Department of Social Services meeting under Human Services, I believe, which took place under Supervisor Ben Driscoll this month. We did have a detailed discussion regarding this topic for my fellow members on ARPA. We did ask that they continue to keep us updated. I mean, this commissioner at the time said he was not concerned. He was not worried about the product, what was moving forward. I think Supervisor Brady, you were there.
we asked him to keep this in the forefront of January, February, and March so that we could be on top of this, knowing that we had some problems this year and we're very concerned about complying with Code Blue, but that the Salvation Army, if in fact the commissioner made the decision, which he told us is within his ability to make that decision on that contract. I know the supervisor from Glens Falls had a conversation with our county attorney's office on how that works. So I think it is going to be in the forefront of everyone's mind with the county because it is a county obligation and significant state revenues that are going into it. So when I did the scoring on this today, I did make that note as well. So I think it's really important you all take the time to score, give feedback to each other, but also that committee is handling this from the perspective of updates to the board. And I'm always a fan of bringing everything to the full board, but get rid of all these committees in a heartbeat and have all these updates be in the full board. But since we don't deal with that, I just want to tell you, it is really moving forward and the discussion because it's so important to our community that we have those resources. And I look forward to Supervisor Driscoll being continuing to communicate regarding that. I'm sure he'll watch this video or someone will tell him and he'll bring it back up to the Commissioner Hanchett.
Madam Chair, that was not part of the information I had, so I'm fine with that if we're on topic.
Yep, it was discussed at that last committee meeting and there was indication from the commissioner that he is moving forward and that there is no need to bring a contract to the county, that it's within his purview to contract with Salvation Army or not, or whoever. So I think that needs to be flushed out a little bit more too before we go forward with awarding money and not knowing what's exactly happening with Code Blue yet.
I'm fine.
But
thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I would like to address the hospital application, knowing that the Community Services Board is basically done with their process and they've awarded the $444,000 to the hospital. Well, as of their meeting is in 2 days, their Community Services Board meeting.
I would make the motion that we pull that in its entire ask to the best of our ability with the monies that are left in ARPA. It's a need. We heard from them. I don't know if anyone took them up on the tour to go over there. But we have a serious mental health problem and we have an ability to try to help and we should.
Well, I would say that's very forward of you, Supervisor Sieber. Their application is for $2.5 million. I guess I will go to Mr. Agnew if he can provide us an update. I know.
Sure.
You would, yeah.
And if I could, when we had talked about this before, I said I would recuse myself from the dialogue also, but then the accreditation team for Glens Falls Hospital arrived today. Our clinical people can't be here. So if it's okay with everybody, I'll stay, just answer questions and I will not vote. That's okay with it.
Yeah, it's right here.
I think it's okay if you're just going to answer questions factually about the application.
Sure. So I can give you a couple of quick updates. The numbers are still staggering. The cost of labor has gone through the roof. I mentioned earlier, we used to see between 150 and 200 behavioral health emergency visits a month. We're seeing between 450 and 700 a month now. 30% of those are adolescents, and some of those adolescents have stayed in the crisis unit because we haven't been able to isolate them from other adults. So we have to keep them in the crisis unit, a windowless room in the emergency department, providing tutoring if they're school age. And they've been there for 100, 120 days or more at a time. It's unthinkable in a lot of ways. And then financially, what that means is that we get paid for the most part. Most of those visits are Medicaid visits. We get paid a one-time emergency department Medicaid visit payment for 120 days of the best care that we can in a difficult situation. I also want to let you know that our fundraising team has done remarkable work in going out to community members and those who have supported emergency care in the past, recognizing that the ARPA committee has a limited pot of money to see how much money we could raise in the community. And I'm extraordinarily grateful to Cindy Sherwood and her team for what they've done. They've raised 1.4 million in cash and pledges already for that. $650,000 in cash. The rest are in pledges payable over between 2 and 5 years. And with the 440,000 allocated by the Community Services Board, providing that is approved by the full board, that would mean that with an allocation from this committee of $600,000, that we would reach the goal that we need to do to fund the project.
That's amazing. Supervisor Sieber, I know you were willing to fund the entire ask.
No.
It sounds like maybe we can,
I guess my specific question is, given those additional resources that have been raised, those dollars, and then the gap, as I call it, the gap, closing the gap funding, it's my understanding somewhere between, I don't know, 650 to 750 is where your shortfall is in trying to get these upgrades and this needed services done, which is I applaud everyone who's contributed towards this. I think it's a huge need. And it does still allow us additional dollars to be able to help EMS and other emergency responses, which are crucial to making sure that mental health is addressed in our community. If we don't have that connection, then we aren't providing those services. So I would amend my very supportive motion to 750 if this committee would be so inclined to assist.
Is there a second? Wayne? No.
Discussion.
Frank?
I'll second.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Supervisor Thomas. Okay, discussion. Supervisor Wild, then I'll come down the line.
Madam Chair, thank you. Right, this is just for questions for you, right? So I'm full support of what you guys are trying to do. It's a travesty that we can't take care of these adolescents in a better way. Can we do anything with the, I'm going to think about the holiday spirit for some additional fundraising. Can we support some fundraising to see if there's some way to even lower that ask even more so over the next couple of weeks?
Anything that this committee would like to do to get the word out would be great. I can tell you that having been a fundraiser for 40 years, that our mantra is to not assume anything. So there's still a lot of work being done, and there's still other donors being spoken with, because every dollar that can be raised that goes above and beyond what the initial project talked about will go to directly benefit those individuals who need the care so badly. So it can increase services. I mean, one of the key components that's missing in having an adolescent psych program is people, right? I mean, the facility is important, but tremendously important, but without adolescent psychiatrists and social workers and the people that need to provide the programming, you can't just open an adolescent psych unit. So we are going to continue to try to raise more money, no doubt.
Wayne?
2 points. As you and I have had discussions, I think this is a great project. Anything over $1 million triggers a whole different level of reporting as the capital project. I'd ask the committee's consideration that the ARPA fund part be 995,000 or whatever, so we don't get into a whole nother level of reporting requirements from our end and performance measures that they would have to meet to do that.
My motion was for 750 though.
Wait, plus the 444.
See, that's the thing. The 444 that we allocated CSB puts it well over.
So what's that?
Would they
555, 552.
Yeah.
Would they be it's like nuts and bolts. Would they be the Community Services Board is a subrecipient, giving them that? Is there a way to?
They're not a subrecipient.
No.
Okay, I would amend my motion.
We tried to make them a subrecipient, but it didn't work.
Okay. So if I may continue.
I apologize, Wayne. Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. The other part is in the email that was presented from Ray earlier and the discussion. Some of the fundraising has a 5-year window, which goes well beyond when the ARPA funds have to be expensed. And if the project can't be completed until then, I just have some concerns about that.
So
Do you have timing
I-
on the project?
can I
Yeah,
address that?
yeah.
Okay, thanks. So these are written and signed pledges. Anybody can go back on a pledge, but I can promise you that the individuals and the organizations that have made these pledges have been longtime donors to the Glens Falls Hospital. And those signed pledges allow us to consider in good faith that we can use other sources of cash and then reimburse ourselves on the way. So once we get over the top, the project's going to happen.
Okay. Those are the only concerns I had at this point.
I mean, I'll just say, if we go over the million, we're going to have more reporting requirements. Is there any legal reason we can't do it? No.
No.
Okay.
They may not like us from what we have to get from them, but other than that,
Well, any further discussion?
Just as an aside, you probably understand the reporting requirements that happen in healthcare already.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, there's an accreditation team there today that's looking at volumes of paperwork. So.
I mean, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
what is the motion for actually?
I think it's still at 750,000. Supervisor Sieber.
I'm watching Wayne say that would be acceptable in a rare moment, if that's acceptable all the way. No, I mean, I want to help in any way that we can. And I think that, again, this is something, if we delay, it's problematic. So yes, I would keep it at 750, provided that I'm seeing this.
That's all right. I'm retiring the 31st of January. So.
I'm like, that would be, no. This community and this.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Where does that leave us after the 250 we reserved? 750 here.
Just give me a second. I sort of have
So
it.
it's another million.
We're at like 1.2 million that we've allocated, so we'd have like 800,000 left.
Okay. We should be
A
able
little bit less than that.
We should be able to do some good things with 800,000 still.
Yeah. All right, I know I'm losing people. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention. That carries.
We have enough. Okay.
That's great.
Motion to adjourn?
Let's just try to get a date.
Thank you.
Let's just try to get a date while we're all sitting here together.
If I know it's a pain for all of us to keep meeting so closely, but I really do want to address the EMS need. It would be great to do that in the near future.
Uh-huh.
In 2 months.
What?
Within 2 months?
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking within 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of information. To my supervisor from Queensbury, you said you read them, so you know there is a lot, but there's more that I think can easily be submitted so we can get going on it. And I don't want to penalize those that did do complete applications either, because there are some on there that are very detailed and very good.
You know, even if we do it within 2 weeks, when's the next full board meeting? That's middle of January, right?
No, it's next Friday.
Yeah, we're not going to get.
Oh, you mean after that? It's January 20th. I mean, I guess we could wait until.
Put on the reorg meeting, January 6th. We've done that before with other things that have come up because we don't have the bi-monthly meetings anymore. Or you can meet a week from today and it would still make the cutoff for the 16th if they can get back to us. And if the rest of the committee members could score and remove that funding priority question. Is anyone opposed to that?
No, I think, I'm sorry, I meant to address that.
Yeah.
Yes, just delete that. Yeah.
I'm just curious about the critical aspect of trying to get this done. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to support something next week. I highly doubt it.
I know it's going to be tough for me too.
And then the week after is the week before the holiday.
We've just been talking about it for so long and it's been, the board keeps talking about it and, it's a shame we don't have all the info in front of us, but.
Do we have committee meetings on December 20th. Would people be available in the afternoon? It's a Tuesday.
I am not.
No. Is everybody else?
Yeah,
sure.
Did we do it? The 20th? All right. Sorry, Wayne, we're going to go without you.
That's fine.
All right. At 3. A little earlier. 2. People do 2 o'clock.
Did I notice come out today about another meeting on the 20th?
Yeah, we have one in the morning at 11
There's
o'clock.
one at 11.
Okay, there's a department head meeting at 10, I believe, also that morning. So that's,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
So we'll do it at 2. All right.
Yeah.
Great. Is there any public comment? Anything further? Motion to adjourn. Supervisor Wild, second by Supervisor Thomas. Thank you.